But in AI, actually, that's not true anymore. It's flipped in AI. It's easier to get distribution than it is to build the product because AI products almost never work. If you make the wrong decision and get lucky, that's still wrong. If you make the right decision and get unlucky, you still made the right decisions. Because once again, with AI, you can build something no one wants. I don't care how efficient it is that you built it. If you're picking between only two options in that sort of huge life-changing situation, then you haven't explored the options enough.
Today on Billions, I'm sitting down with Jason Cohen, the guy who built not one, but $2 billion companies with completely opposite strategies. First, he bootstrapped SmartBear to millions in profit with zero funding, sold it in 2007, and later became a unicorn in 2009. Then, he did it again with WP Engine, but this time he raised $250 million from Silver Lake in January 18. By 2024, WP Engine reached $400 million in revenue with 200,000 customers. Both companies became unicorns, both using radically different playbooks. Jason, thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking to that double unicorn blueprint, and I want to ask you what changed your mind about taking VC money after you had bootstrapped for years?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, SmartBear became a unicorn maybe 10 years after that, not the following year. But to your point, they were built very differently in different industries. And what that tells you is there is not a blueprint. So that's easy. We can dispense with that idea. What maybe changed my mind is easy. So WP Engine was my fourth company. SmartBear was my third company. The more successful they are, the more you want to talk about them, I suppose. But that's not how life really is. There's lots of companies and outcomes and everything. And so at SmartBear, I had a nice exit. So I wasn't forced to do anything in particular and not in a particular timeline, which is nice. And it just so happened with WP Engine, about 2 years in, I saw, wow, this one could actually be really big. It was clear the market was big and growing. The company, it was easy to sell things. A lot of people wanted it. We had a great niche. So in other words, everything was kind of lined up with this could be actually venture sized. Most things aren't, and that's not saying anything bad. Most of my companies weren't, and that's not saying anything bad about them. Just most products aren't going to make billions in revenue or be worth tens of billions. Just most aren't like that. It's okay. I think we get wrapped up around the whole VC thing, but how many companies do VCs invest in every year? A few thousand? How many of those survive? A few hundred? Okay, but there's 1 million companies, 1 million small businesses, just in America, in the world, much more. Okay, so VCs don't fund very much. So, very few successful companies are funded by VCs. So let's not get carried away. Anyway, but WP Engine they had these characteristics of this could be really big. And so I could have a different path this time, a different journey, a different set of challenges, different goals, and so on. And a combination of the fact that it was my fourth go around with a bootstrap company, and then I was a father already, and I was older. So just for personal reasons of wanting something different, and having done other things for, at that point, still more than 10 years, right? I still had done many things. It felt like I want to do it differently this time, and this one could be done differently this time. That was the confluence that made me say, yeah, I'll take money this time. And of course, it wasn't $250 million at first. It was 1.2 because I had some angels. And then the second round was, get ready, 2 million, right? So we started modestly.
Gradually.
Yeah, well, I never wanted to raise more money than the amount of ARR we had.
Okay.
That way we have enough money to do something that's appropriate to our size, but not so much that sometimes you drown in that. And also, I never raised at a crazy valuation. Again, you don't want a low valuation where you get diluted for nothing, but you don't want a valuation that's too high that you have to grow into before additional growth kicks in, and finally you can get there, because then the next round might be hard. So we were very practical in terms of raising the right amount of money at the right valuation, to where it was always possible. Of course, we also grew really fast, but so good. So I guess it makes all things good. But if we had raised at too high a valuation, it might have still been hard to raise again. I think a lot of companies are finding that now, where they're very healthy, they're very good, growth is okay, and it's hard to raise money because, oh wait, you don't have AI or something, and so all of a sudden they're not interested. It's very difficult if you haven't kept those metrics together.
I'm actually curious because you mentioned AI. you've been in business for a very long time. Like you've seen many different cycles. The crazy hype where you can raise super easily, and then the winter when there is no money, and you see
Right,
like
right.
the tide going up, and everyone's like swimming naked. So
Yeah.
the question for you is like, what's your belief now with AI and how things? Some people talk about SaaS-pocalypse on Twitter or this kind of thing. Like, what's your view on it?
Well, I don't think SaaS companies are going away. I've yet to find someone who was paying for a substantial SaaS product and then vibe coded such that their company is now not using the SaaS product. I've yet to see one. Of course, the stock market valuations are down now. You could argue they were too high. You could argue now they're too low. But when you have companies like HubSpot with more than $2 billion in revenue, still growing 30% year over year and profitable, and their stock goes down, you say, okay, it's either temporary or was value too high or something, but it's not like HubSpot's going away. That's not the conclusion. You could say, but AI is the next wave. Obviously it is. But I guess one of the problems with these prognostications, like, well, AI will kill everything and so forth, is the timeline of these prognostications matters. For example, in 2010, there were people saying the stock market's going to crash. Well, it didn't. Now, eventually in 2020, 21, it crashed. Okay, so 10 years later, it crashed. So you can say, well, I was right. I told you it was going to crash. Well, that's terrible investment advice, right? Rather, you want
Mm.
someone who says, it's going to crash in the next 3 to 6 months, so that I'm getting out now, and then it does crash in, say, 4 months or something. Like, you don't have to be perfect, but if you're not specific about your timeline, the prediction doesn't mean anything. Elon's been saying we're going to have self-driving cars in about 2 years, and he's been saying that for like 15 years, right? And if anyone's going to have it first, it's Waymo and not Elon. So the fact that you made the prediction is irrelevant if you don't have a timeline behind it that's meaningful. So will AI take over everything? Yeah, probably. But is HubSpot going to go out of business in a year or 10 years or never or something? Like, I don't know. Okay, well then it's not really a meaningful statement. It's not helping you and me and anybody build a company now and make decisions. So I think what is useful is to say things like, the customers have the same problems they always had, meaning marketers are trying to get leads and be seen in a sea of stuff that's difficult to get attention in, and influencers are trying to get people by being crazy and doing stuff and other sorts of stuff that's not like marketers at companies, and engineers still need to make code, and the finance team needs to do their annual audit and do something about that and have systems like all these issues are still issues. And so what AI does is say, but we may have new solutions that could never exist before, or it wasn't cheap enough before, or whatever, not effective enough. And so we can solve these same problems we've always had, but in a different and, let's suppose, better way. So that's pretty interesting. So what is true is, if you're a traditional company, if whatever AI is going to do to the functionality in your area, that is true. That I don't know the timeline, but the clock is ticking, for which whatever you're doing now is now the old way. And that's okay, but that market will become smaller over time. You'll fight with other legacy products. The only way to get a new customer will be to steal one from someone else, and that someone else is probably pretty good. And if they are going to switch products, are they really going to go to another legacy one or whatever the new stuff is? So in other words, while I don't think it'll kill it super fast, I do think some of these pressures might appear relatively soon. And so in any way, that's your future. So especially on a podcast called Billions, if you're trying to build a big company, that takes a long time. I know even in the age of AI, we always see, oh, but this one got there in a month. Right. But almost all of them don't. So
Yeah.
even in AI. So settle down. Right. It's going to take many years. And so if it's a legacy non-AI solution, and it's going to be 5-10 years before you get to the kind of size that you're aiming for. Okay, well, and you don't have AI, like it's possible, but it doesn't seem likely that you'll be relevant.
Yeah. And at your company right now, like, how do you approach this? Like, do you feel like you're gonna have to make an entire switch to interface and how you see things, and try to solve like new problems in different ways, or what's kind of
No,
the
solving
mindset?
the same problems in new ways.
Okay.
right? Our customers have WordPress sites. They need to build WordPress sites. They want to add content. They want to get found on SEO. They want to send people there and track them with metrics. They want to have a content calendar and write stuff for that. They want to be found globally, not just locally, some of them anyway. They want to convert those folks that come to whatever. If it's a media site, they want to have them click a lot so they get ad revenue. If they're an e-commerce site, they want them to buy something. If they're a company, they want them to at least understand the product, if not buy. Like, these are still what they want. So can we deliver something that helps those things happen more? Because AI could help sometimes. So for example, in e-commerce, a lot of e-commerce people don't even know this, but when someone searches on an e-commerce site, they're instantly 3 times more likely to buy. Now, that's obvious in retrospect because, of course, they're showing some kind of intent. What are they searching for? A particular product by name, or at least a category that they're researching. So it just stands to reason they'd be a lot more serious than random riffraff that comes to the site. Okay, so no surprise. It's interesting that the number is 3x. Okay, we have tens of thousands of e-commerce stores that do significant revenue. We have even more that don't. So okay, we're not Shopify, but we still have a lot of data. So we know this. Okay, so the search experience, like what happens next, is very important because this is a golden opportunity right here. This is what you want to have, a great thing that they want to click and buy because this is it. So we built a AI-based e-com search bar. So it's semantic and understands your product line. Okay, you can imagine what you would want it to be, even being able to say stuff like, I pronate my foot and I like a wide toe box and I'm looking for a shoe. Whatever they put in, you want to satisfy that because here they are. So that's, for example, a product that we have. So that's an interesting way where it makes the customer more money. It makes sense for us to do it because we have access to their database of products. We're also physically there when the person's clicking because we're running the website. So we're there, you might say, or have access at least to all these things already. Therefore, it makes sense for us to do it. So that's the kind of way that we're thinking about how can we, ultimately the best way for any company to think about it is how do you make your customers successful in the way that they measure it? Best is revenue. How do we make the e-commerce store more revenue? That's the best answer. But okay, not everything is that. If it's a finance tool, you could say, we want the next audit to have 0 discoveries, right? I don't know what that means exactly, but as a vision statement anyway, that's pretty good. And yes, that's exactly what they want. Yeah, right. They don't expect the finance tool to create revenues. That's okay. But what is ultimately, what would they see as this, as undeniable, huge success or value? You should be asking that. Now, often you can't measure it. Yeah. Right? Often the measuring of that number is not in your purview as the vendor. But what you can do is say what it is anyway as your goal, as your vision statement anyway, because there are some things you could measure that are proxies of that, or at least just as you're saying, well, then what kinds of features, what kinds of functionality, what things would we want to tell a customer in a sales pitch? What would we want to promise on our homepage? What would we want our existing customers to at least think? So what reports might we show them every week to show them something? In other words, it imbues this concept would imbue all the things that are in your control with a direction. So that's part of what a strategy is, right? So I do think it's useful to say what that thing is, even objectively, even if you can't measure it, because it still can make everyone aligned around that. You can always, by the way, ask the customer, hey, do you think this is making audits better? Do you think this is increasing revenue? And whether or not they have data, if they're saying yes, and maybe there's a scale, and I don't know, but if they're basically, if the trend is to the positive, that's pretty good.
You're onto something.
Because okay, it's not hard data, I know that, but it's better than not asking and just saying, well, they click a lot, so I guess they like it. Yeah, that's not true. Sometimes when they spend a lot of time in the product, it's because the product's confusing and they can't figure out what to do. Sometimes when they don't spend time in the product, it's because it's just working. So, all these kinds of metrics, like time spent in the product, they're okay, but they're pretty far away from what you probably want to be optimizing for.
Yeah, definitely. And the way you framed it, it's you have an existing problem, as you mentioned. I think the the search engine is really smart, because obviously like search could be powered by Elasticsearch, Algolia, whatever, but
Oh yeah.
it's and right now it's actually like as you mentioned, what you're doing with AI is probably a lot better to fetch the right product or the right article to solve this problem. But to me, this is like a way to solve a problem in kind of an iterative way, because you already have a system in place, which is your website where people go and where people buy, and it's like an e-commerce website. And this is very iterative. Like you have a problem on this and you're trying to like make it better. Another way to look at the problem is to say, what do people actually have an e-commerce website for? It's because they want to make sales. And then the next question could be, how will people, like buy in the future? Is it still through e-commerce or is it through something else? So the question I have for you, it's like in innovation, you can either iterate or you can be radical and do something totally different that's kind of like building the future. So
Yeah.
in your case, because you have a very established business with 400
Right.
million plus in ARR, like is the way to innovate by iteration, or do you also dedicate a part of your budget to what we could call like a radical innovation or moonshot project?
Well, I think at a certain scale, you can start thinking about how you allocate the capital of your company. You might say some of that is, well, it's all money, it's people, however you'd like to say it. There's a lot of sort of well-worn ways to do that. These are not that useful for a startup. But when you have, we have more than 1,000 people, and we have the ability to try things. And so there's, some people say that one of the roles of the CEO is to be a capital allocator. When you're starting up, you hear that and you're like, well, I get it. Like I decide what to do and what to spend money on, but you would never think of yourself that way. It's just not how you think about what to do. And you shouldn't, by the way, you shouldn't. But at a larger company, it does make sense to say, we have a budget, we have things we need to do, we have, kind of running the business stuff and incremental stuff we need to do. But also if we never try anything new, that would be bad. And so there's some way to allocate the amount of attention, people, money to, like you say, like big new, it still needs to be adjacent things. It doesn't make sense for us to try self-driving cars, right? Because there's no current expertise, capability, assets, brands, customers. None of that would apply, so it wouldn't make any sense. So it still needs to be adjacent, which means leveraging some of the things I just said, where it's like, well, if we built this, our current customers would want it. So the distribution channel would be in. Now, maybe or maybe not, they would want this new product. That's the big bet. But at least we have the distribution. So that would be a good bet, right? That's the typical bet, because distribution's harder than building, right? So, but in AI, actually, that's not true anymore. It's flipped in AI. It's easier to get distribution than it is to build the product, because AI products almost never work. Like most of the things I use don't work. I spend a lot of time I spend at Claude Code is correcting it, right? And then sometimes it gets it really good and it's amazing. I'm not sure if it's saving time overall. I think so, but like, sometimes it saves a ton of time. But then sometimes like you're just wrestling with it. And you're like, what am I doing? It's like 3 lines of code. I could just fix this. It's so confused, Where I just watched a video the other day of someone showing how to use Claude Code better. I'm like, good, maybe I need to use it better. And I would say like in 45 minutes, probably a dozen times, he was like, see, we'll just tell Claude Code to do this. Oh, well, it didn't quite. Well, in other words, like it doesn't work that well, right? A lot of the support AI doesn't work that well. A lot of times when you talk to support now, it's still not AI. But I thought LLMs were there already. Well, they're not.
Yeah.
So in AI, it's funny. Everybody wants to try it. Like you make a new AI product, it's very easy to get people to try it, and then they all cancel in 4 months because it doesn't really work. So AI has this weird opposite pattern to how the products have been. The other thing, though, is again this notion of like, wait, we already have a product, so is that different? Yes, it is different. So I think there's 3, you might say, categories of AI products, and you could split it up in any number you want. I find this particular one useful. One is you have incumbents who are adding AI to the product. So it's Notion who's adding AI, and Google Sheets adds AI, and so forth. It doesn't work very well, right? Have you tried using the stuff in
Yeah,
Sheet? Like it's
yeah,
sometimes okay, and it doesn't help that much, right? So okay, but they still should do that, right? Because if they can get it to be better and better, they do need to do that. So they're smart, but it's not that interesting. Um, the second kind is AI for experts. So you are a software developer. Can AI make you a better software developer? You're a designer. Can AI make you a better designer? You're a marketing writer. Can it help you write content better, faster, more, whatever? And so there, the answer to me is often yes. And the reason is that because to the extent the AI doesn't give you the right answer, the expert knows what to do anyway. If it writes something that isn't good, the writer fixes it. You know, if the design isn't good, the designer just doesn't use it, and so forth. Um, so the expert was already doing the job and therefore can still do the job, and maybe AI can accelerate parts of it. Great. That's an area where I think if you're making a startup in that kind of a zone, the fact that AI doesn't work all the time is okay, or could be made to be okay. The third kind is AI for muggles. I'm not a software developer. I want to build an app anyway. I'm not a designer. I want to make a website anyway, right? I'm not a writer. I want to write a book anyway. And the thing is, AI is not good enough for that. So it is good enough to be a lot of fun, right? If you're not a coder, you can make some demoware, some weird thing that you have to maintain for the rest of your life, and you can't, and you don't know how to do it, and then you can't bring it over the line. Like you can't get that last bit to make it good because you don't know how, and you can't cajole the AI enough. You don't even know what to ask necessarily. And so, while that's really interesting, and again, you could make a you could guess that some of these things will work, but you better put a timeline on it, you know, because sure, like in 50 years, I suppose so, you know, I don't know. Anyway, that's not in sight right now. So you could do that. A lot of the things where people say they're going to change the whole world are in that category. So I'm not saying don't do it or I don't like it or anything like that. It's just, it's not as obvious as it might seem that that's possible right now. So I know if you did it, if you succeed, it's probably great. You're probably right. Like in that sense, it's a asymmetric bet in your favor. It's just, I think the probability of success is much lower than people give it credit for because AI is not that good.
And in your perspective, like when do you think the conversation we're having right now about AI being like not that good? Because like to me, I actually recorded like an interview with someone at Lovable Lazar with like vibe coding a lot, and he did a lot of great things, and it's really amazing. But I think a lot of people struggle when they're not like expert to get to like the level of having something that's maintainable and that they can
Well, it's
really
more than
use.
struggle. I've never heard of someone getting to that point who's not a coder, not once ever. So yeah, they're struggling. But I mean, that's part of why I don't write about AI. I don't talk about AI because whatever we say, it probably doesn't matter in 6 or 12 months. It'll be a different set of things. So I like to try to write about things that are evergreen. I guess I would say like I was saying, a vision statement is something that you try to do. You may not succeed, but that's your goal. So I want to write things where they're true, 50 years from now. So some of them are, like some of the things I've written are almost 20 years old, and they read like, and people will read them and say, "Holy crap! I didn't realize this was written in 2008." It feels like it was written now. I'm like, great, that's my goal. Now I'm not claiming they all succeed or that I even believe myself from 20 years ago. Right? I've grown and changed, haven't I? So it's not like I'm saying that actually happens all the time. That's my goal. So I don't want to talk. So I don't talk about AI because that's going to be different. I'm going to be wrong. So I try to talk about things that I feel are at least worth thinking about and considering, if not deeply true, and that maybe helps people think or helps people understand a certain mechanism or something like that. That might still be true. That's all I do. So I'm not an AI expert. I'm not an AI strategist. I can explain what we're doing, but
And what are the things that you wrote about that you feel are still true, that you wrote about maybe like 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's hundreds of articles. So
But the topic,
things about founder psychology, I don't think have changed at all. There's sort of like this weird combination of actually thinking your ideas are better than everyone else and also having imposter syndrome at the same time, which is very funny. There's tricks like, it's, I've been at it for 6 months. It's not really working, but I'm not sure whether what I should do is persevere and push through and it's coming, or whether I should give up. That's very difficult. And I don't think AI solves it, by the way, at least not even close right now. What kind of company should I build? How to make a good strategy? What kind of markets are good? How to kind of poke at your own ideas, sort of with intellectual honesty. How to interview customers, the fact that you should interview customers before you have a product, so you know what to build. Because once again, with AI, you can build something. If you build something no one wants, I don't care how efficient it is that you built it. So that sort of discovery of what is it that people would actually want to buy, where the word want and buy are both doing a lot of work there. Want and to buy. And so that's hard. So I wrote a lot about that. I think all of that is still equally true now as then.
I think you wrote also
Yeah.
about the different type of CEO, and that you would only figure out the kind of CEO at the stage that you will encounter. So you kind of like discover it sometimes a little bit too late. So typically when you start, you want to build you have this image of a company you want to build with 1,000 people, but actually when you reach 100, you realize that you spend your entire day like managing and talking and hiring and that it's not the company you had envisioned. So
Right.
what kind of founder are you, and can you maybe like walk us through that journey? Because I'm guessing like the businesses you built, as you mentioned, have been different
Yeah.
along the journey.
I'm a great CEO through probably 30, maybe 50 people. And I've done that well, not necessarily 50, but I've done that kind of range a few times. So I know that. But at WP Engine, I was a CEO for 4 years, but then we hired the wonderful Heather Brunner, who's been the CEO now for I think 11 or 12 years. That was so amazing. It was such a good decision. I mean, just everything about it. I shifted over to be the CTO, but over those years, and I was there for years, but over the years, I continued to change roles as I continued to try to find what is in this intersection of things that I like and things that I'm actually good at and things the company needs done and maybe even needs me to do. So I would continue to shift over the years as that intersection seemed to change. Of course, everyone's different. Like, of course, there are founders who want to be the CEO of, even when Amazon's as big as Amazon is. So this is not, this is such a personal thing. It almost doesn't matter what I did, except to show that many paths are possible, and except to talk about like, how did I make that decision? Because maybe the way to make the decision is something others can do. And again, it's those three things and asking that, which is very similar to many other things. It's like Ikigai. It's like, Daniel Pink stuff. Like, of course, because it's basically all the same thing. We want to be needed, that we need to do things that are in fact needed. Of course, we want to enjoy it at least sometimes. We need to be competent because the company needs everyone to be competent in the role that they're in. So, I mean, these things you might say they're sort of obvious or automatic, and yet so many people act like they don't know about it, or they're not acting accordingly. So we still need to say it and write it down and say, you've got to look at this, because when they say, well, I know, it's like, well, you're not acting like you know. Right?
And do you feel like over time you changed, like, or at least your vision changed? Like I'm asking because typically for me, like
Yeah.
I started company, I like stepped down as CEO when we were like 100 people because I didn't really like enjoy the hiring, and it was just too repetitive, and I wanted like more innovation. So do you feel like over time this is something that change and evolve, or do you feel like
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah. You change over time. The company changes, obviously. And this is one of those things where you can't know when you start what it's like. And so you can't predict what you're going to want. So it's
okay
like, if you never had kids before, you think you know what it's like to have kids, and you can recite the words. Oh, it's the hardest and the best thing ever, and blah, blah, blah. You can recite those words, and you have no idea what it's like. If you've never started a company, you can intellectually say what you think it is like, and it's not like that. And month 7, when you're struggling and wake at 2 a.m, that's just that's just not how you. Even if you knew, it would be a struggle. Like, you just didn't know what this was like, and whether you would want to do it for years and years. You just don't. You might think you do, and you don't really know. Even younger, like, is this the career you wanted? Is this the school you should go to? Or is this someone you should marry? Like, and is getting married a good idea? What's that going to be like? these are all things you don't know. And so since you don't know, even things like, I don't know, a pro-con list or a rubric or something doesn't help because you don't know what to put on there. You don't know how to weight those things. You don't really know what they are. None of that stuff is useful. So that doesn't mean there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, but it does mean like you're not going to find out ahead of time and then make all these decisions and it's going to work out perfectly unless you just get really lucky. Right. And so, what do? You say, okay, I'm going to not be second guessing myself every day because that's nonsense and a distraction. But at the same time, I'm not going to hold on to whatever I thought I needed to do or needed to be or something like this. And I need to check in. Maybe it's once a year. Maybe it's just sometimes when an event happens, I don't know. And try to figure out, like, is this right? Is this good? Am I up for this for another 3 months, 12 months? Does something need to change? And then the other thing I would say is when you're in the place where you're like, yeah, something needs to change, right? I feel like a lot of times we just feel like there's one or two options. And then we kind of don't like either one, and then we pick one. So if you're picking between only two options in that sort of huge life-changing situation, then you haven't explored the options enough, and you probably need someone else to help make the options, not help tell you what to do, right?
Yeah.
But help, like, what are the possibilities? Because I've talked to lots of founders who are burnt out, and they're like, I guess I just need to leave, or I guess I need to sell, even if it's for lower money. And maybe indeed, maybe that's right. These are two of the options on the menu. But don't you want to see 17 choices on the menu and then explore 3 of them and then pick one? Isn't that what you would rather do? So, like, they don't think about stuff like, actually, there's someone at the company who would probably be a good CEO. I could step aside, still get some of the profits. They have renewed energy. It gives space for everyone to grow. And the company actually could be amazing rather than me just flushing it or selling it, or like getting a partner of some kind, so that you can be doing something else, or just changing what your role is, or like what I did, stepping out of the CEO role, but still staying for another 12 years, like, right. And trying to seek that. That's another one. Changing whether the company is trying to grow or trying to be profitable, changing the market to say, I'd rather have a smaller company that's lower risk, or I'd rather have a larger company that's higher risk, or, like, there's other kinds of alterations where you go, oh, if that's what I was working at every day, I actually would like that. So, like, at Basecamp, they pick profit over a number of people because they just know that they don't want and would hate having lots of people. So they just don't. And just whatever they can do with 50 people is what they do. And they're very profitable and very happy. And then they have other interests, So you could have that kind of an idea. So anyway, this is just a long way of saying there are many choices. You may not be either aware of them or thinking through them, and you may need someone else who maybe have seen them before or something like that to be a mirror or to help supply what the menu could look like. Of course, you want to stay away from people who try to tell you what to do. That's not what you need. But to expand, what are the possibilities and what do they really mean? Because you've never done any of them. That's smart. That's smart to explore that, right? And then pick one that may be better than you were thinking about. So I do think, coming back to the top, there's some of the most important decisions in our life we actually can't reason about in the kind of a typical rubric, analytical, pro-con, projection sort of a probability sense. Like, none of those are the right tools for these things. But paying attention, seeing what the options are, trying to find people who have at least some experience with those options, so you have some idea of what that might mean. These are among the tools you can use in that kind of, I think, very common situation.
And how did you manage kind of like this transition from the time where you were like, okay, like maybe this is not the role for me, to I'm laying out all the options and now I know what I want to try? Like, did you have I don't know, a coach? Did you talk to other entrepreneurs? Like, what was kind of the process?
So in my case, I knew I wanted to stay at the company and be the CTO. Okay. I knew, but remember, fourth company.
You had experience.
20 years doing this. Like I knew myself a little bit then, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little unfair, but that's what it was then, right? And so I knew like, oh no, I love at that time we were scaling very fast, and the engineering puzzles for scaling, but still have quality, but also be fast, was very interesting to me. In fact, it's part of why I started the company. Part of it was I had a popular blog on startups, I still do. And the other part is I've always loved optimization problems in coding. Always, like even as a kid, I was like, how fast can I do this? I don't know. Oh, there's a new way to do matrix multiplication. I'm going to try it. Not that I had any matrices to multiply, but it was like fun. We're just, I worked on in the 90s. I worked on, before I did a startup, but I was working, I was working on a company doing image algorithms. I mean, we had a product, but what I was working on is making arbitrary angle image rotation really fast with Gaussian, blur is kind of in quotes. You don't want it to be blurry, but anyway, it's a long story. But this is in the 90s with that tech, and so writing some assembly in tight areas and blah, 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 blah. But what if the image is huge and can't fit into memory? And I love that forever. So here's WP Engine, the idea of, websites need to be fast. I love the idea of fast and scalable as an engineer. I have this problem myself, which of course does not make it a company at all. But it clued me in that it could be. After I did 40 customer interviews, I asked 50 and I did 40 customer interviews. I discovered that in fact, there is a lot of people who want their website to be fast and scalable and secure and everything. And that I could get to them, and I knew how to talk to them. I figured all that out. As I say, the way of interviewing customers is one of the things I think I've written about. I have my system completely written out there. Anyone can find it if they want. And I do think that's still completely valid today. And I continue to use it during WP Engine throughout the whole time. So I'm certain that technique still works. Anyway, so the point being, like, I've known, because of this, I knew, like, I want to be the CTO of this company. This is why, but I shouldn't be the CEO. So it was a pretty clear thing. I guess I could have left, or I don't know, something, but again, I wanted to do it. So I didn't want those other options. But like at SmartBear, I burned out. I mean, I absolutely resented coming to work. Didn't like it. Didn't realize that I burnt out. I wasn't introspective enough to realize that. So the whole thing was pretty bad. I didn't consider options, and I wish I had.
Okay.
But that's not a good story of, well, what options do I have? Well, I didn't. That's the point. I was burned out. I didn't know what to do. I sold it. Now, in retrospect, you could say, but then you did W Engine, and it was, so much bigger, while I was there anyway. So you made the right choice. Like, that's not the right, that's not what a good decision is. That's lucky, right? That's good. Yeah. That's my path, right? But in life, it's just like, the Andy Duke thing in poker, right? If you make the wrong decision and get lucky, that's still wrong. If you make the right decision and get unlucky, you still made the right decision. So I made the wrong decision at SmartBear because I didn't take the advice I'm giving you right now. At WP Engine, I did. And then I've, again, worked with other companies about that. I mean, it just stands to reason. Of course you want lots of options. I mean, what? I don't see how you wouldn't, other than, well, I don't know what. Of course you want to know different possibilities so you can pick one. You don't want to be told or forced to pick one in particular, but like, how do you not want to know all the possible ways out of whatever you're feeling?
No, 100% agree. And that transition, from, because you kept a very operational role, like you were a CEO moving like to CTO. So
yeah,
you were still in the company, you were still around, so people could still like come to talk to you, see you.
I was running a team of product and engineering and DevOps, like, yeah, I mean, a team. I mean, even then it was several teams. I'm trying to think, when I stepped out of that role, I'm not sure how many, we probably had something like 20 or 30 product and engineering teams, plus the rest of the structures around that and design and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I was more than just around.
So the question for you is like, because when I stepped down, like as a CEO, like there were like a transition where people would still like, like come, ask, etc., etc. And I want to see like and understand like how did you manage kind of like that time, and also
it's really easy. Yeah, really easy. The first thing is a really clear separation of like when you change. So we had I really talked about, in fact, I talked about a lot of things we just talked about. I was very vulnerable and open about having burned out at SmartBear, and I didn't want that to happen again. I want to stay in the place where I'm happy, mostly, using my strengths, and the company needs it. I want to stay there and not burn out, and etc. Like the various things like that, so people could see why. And then afterwards, it's really simple. Anytime someone come directly to me, I'd say, well, what did Heather say when you asked her? And if they say, well, I haven't asked Heather, I'm like, oh, well, ask her. And then that's probably all you need. But if you still want to talk, I'm here. And that's just, you just say that every single time, just automatic. And then very quickly, of course, they're not going to come back and do that 17 times. And usually they don't come back at all because, of course, why would they? It also feels really weird because then it's like, well, I talked to Heather and now I'm going around behind her back and like, we did not have a culture where people would do such a thing. So like, if there really was like a discussion, that would be different. They'd come back and say, well, I talked to Heather and actually she recommended that we discuss it and then bring back a solution. I'm like, great, let's do that. You're right. Like of course, if we're doing it like that, that's wonderful. But so it's actually quite easy mechanically, by being really open and honest about the whole thing, and then just being incredibly firm on your redirection.
Boundaries and
everyone's
redirection.
What is it? 301 redirect, not a 302. Don't come back to me again. Just permanently redirect to Heather. unless it's CTO stuff, then you're correct to come to me, right? That's my thing.
I like developer jokes.
Yeah.
And
well, if you
and
like
now
that,
like
our corporate address in Austin is 504 Lavaca. 504 for a web company. Very, very
nice.
bad sign.
Bad sign. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's one project right now that's like really exciting you in the company?
Well, I stepped away from WP Engine actually a couple of years ago. And so I'm writing a book.
Okay.
And so,
nice.
I've been writing these articles for almost 20 years, 18 years, something like that. And for a while I didn't know, I kind of wanted to write a book in the sense of I wanted to have a concept that I could really delve into. I guess you're not supposed to say delve anymore because ChatGPT says it. Anyway, that I could really dig into and try to do like my best work ever. Some of my best ideas, new stuff too, around some concept. And I didn't have a concept for a while, but then I did. And so it's on pre-order now. So I'm not here to, try to sell 1 billion copies of a book or anything like that. But because it's a labor
but
of
you should.
and
it's nice.
craft.
I mean, your content is great.
That's
so
what it is. And so of course I like it when people buy, but I'm not, So it's you can pre-order it at hiddenmultipliers.com. That's the name of the book, Hidden Multipliers.
I like it.
Way to jump starting your growth through with your current budget and team. And of course, doing that through things you can do differently that have a big impact. And so every chapter goes into detail on one of these areas, where I've either experienced myself or seen others, or typically both, some kind of mechanism that's kind of systematic to a business, and therefore it's fairly repeatable, fairly common, that you can do. So it's, again, I mean, you can probably tell I'm never like this. It's not like every chapter, if you just do it, you'll double revenue or some kind of nonsense like that. But I do think that all of these are fairly common mechanisms, and they generally work. And so out of 10 or 11 chapters, I'm sure that some of them will apply and some of them will be helpful, right? Like, and it's easy to, there's a sample chapter there, or again, like I have hundreds of articles online, so you can just see if you like what I say and how I write, stuff like that. And the articles online are completely open. Like there's no ads, there's no courses to buy, there's no paywall. They're all there. In fact, there's even a link to an RSS feed that contains the entire content of every article in simplified markdown. So you could put the whole damn thing in an AI if you want. Like it's very, very open.
And get the insights.
I try to give away everything except, buy the book. It's my best work. And, it's nice to have something like that too.
Have you tried to create like a JSON chatbot where you put all your
many
RSS
others have. There's probably a dozen or 18 of them out there where they loaded all this stuff up. And in fact, it's part of why I made that feed. I'm like, well, this is going to happen anyway. It'd be fun if someone was actually good at it. Because again, like you start asking it and it's like, it's just kind of giving you general business advice, It's not generally, but for people that want to try it, it's like, look, here's here's almost 200 articles that are pretty good, that you could load in easily, and automatically, even as I post new stuff, you could update it because there's the modification dates right there in the feed. It'd be easy to do that if you wanted. So, yeah.
And I want to ask you like some maybe like more personal question, because you sold your first company. Then, the second one is obviously like a huge success, and to a scale where you like money is not a problem anymore. Like how from a personal perspective, like do you decide of what you're going to do next, since everything you've accomplished, in the software world is really like impressive? Like how do you feel about what's next? Like we sometimes talk about like founders depression after like
Yeah,
leaving
definitely.
and yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Um, I I have seen a lot of that. I've done it myself a few times now. I mean, meaning leaving a company that's my identity and then going, what's next? And of course, talked to a lot of other people who have, and I don't know. I think it's hard. There's not like some formula. There's not a blueprint for what to do next. And what people actually do next is all over the place. So there's this interesting paper from Credit Suisse. I think they interviewed something like 24 entrepreneurs like this. They sell their company. They have enough money that they don't have to work again. What happens next? All but one had symptoms that are like postpartum depression. Like you say depression, it's specifically postpartum depression. Like who you are is no longer who you are and you don't know what you are anymore, which is different than just like a depression. It's like the world, there's no point in being in the world. It's not the same thing. Another interesting thing is there's these MRIs studies they did with entrepreneurs where they would put them in the machine. They show them sort of generic, bland images of landscapes and stuff. So the brain they can see the brain in the sort of resting state. Then they show them a picture of their kids. And of course, the brain lights up in certain places like, oh, everything we just said, the good and the bad and the this and that, whatever the heck it is, who knows? Then they show them landscapes, brain goes back to neutral. Then they show them a picture of the brand or logo of their company. And the brain lights up again, but specifically in the child formation.
Wow. Okay.
So when they say it's your baby, it's like physiologically, it's half true. Of course, not the same thing as your kid, obviously, because I've sold my company and I would not sell my daughter. So like, it's not
I
the
hope
same
not.
thing. But the point is, it's more, the analogy is my baby, or I sold it, now I don't know who I am. That has a physiological basis. Those are decent analogies or words to describe what's going on, metaphors. They're accurate, right? Let's put it that way. So that's the right lens to think about. What is it like? What does it go through? So what do? You have to find who you are again. What are you now? There's not going to be a blueprint. Now there are definitely books. There's stuff, there are books and things about, yeah, how do you find out now? The hard part is that you have to redefine who you are. Not all of who you are, of course, right? But like something about who you are. But also you're also in a sense a better and worse place in other ways. Like, I try to keep up exercise and all that stuff, but I'll never be, every decade that passes, I will be substantially worse in that department, no matter what I do, right? Than I used to be. There's mental decline at some point, etc. Right? On the other hand, you have money, you have resources. The whole point is you exited, so you have the ability to do stuff. You have more experience, maybe you have wisdom. Who knows? You may know more about yourself simply because you've lived with yourself for a little while. Some of that may have changed, but anyway, maybe some of it you can accept, both the strengths and the weaknesses, perhaps. So that's a very different thing than it was, let's say, 15 years ago or 16 years ago when I started WP Engine, or, oh my gosh, more like 24 years ago when I started Smart Bear. Like, holy crap, like that's a lot of time to understand these things. So it's like, why can I make what I think is a good book now? Because of all that time, and also writing that whole time so I could get as good at writing as I can get, and investigate these ideas and really bring them into relief, and have the best ideas I can have over that much time. I can make a book I myself couldn't have made before, and no one else could make, because it wouldn't be my insights, especially the things that I've invented there. And I say invented, but we stand on the shoulders of giants, so maybe it's one brick out of a wall, but okay, fine. I added something to the wall, damn it. Proud of that one brick. It's still a brick, and it's my style. Some people like it, whatever. Some people don't, I suppose. It's long, so if you like tweets, then never mind. then learn about your business from Twitter if you can. So, but because I have all that this makes sense, and I don't have to make money. Good, because books don't make money, right? But what's nice is, I would talk to editors or publishers, and they would say, "What's your goal?" I'm like, "My goal is to make the best possible book, whatever that means to me." And then my goal is, and just for my own pride of craft, you could say. And then my goal is, I want the most number of people to actually get benefit from it. Like actually say, "Oh my gosh, I did this, I did that. I have all these ideas. I did some, they worked." I want to maximize that number. So that's probably, in my case, that's probably selling a couple of thousand books to people that read it instead of 1 million books and 1% read it, right? Like I'd rather sell fewer books, but the people are like, "Oh my gosh, I keep coming back to this. This helped me so much," and that kind of thing. Those are the best emails I get, where just at random, "You don't know this, but I've been reading you forever, and I did this and I did that. My company's doing good, and I just, you don't know how much of an impact you've had on the." That is the best. Like I could sell, one of those emails is worth like selling 10,000 books. That's the ratio I'd put it at. Like selling 10 million books would be pretty cool, but like I would rather have one of those emails, like, because that really means you made a difference for someone else. Somehow this was useful to them. It spoke to them when they needed it. That is the goal. So that means I need to make something as good as I can to have a chance at creating that impact in somebody, but I don't care about quantity. And so it's funny because the publishers, they're not used to that, right? They're like, "Oh, well, like, do they want to put that much editorial time in? Because like, oh, you want it to be good? Oh, I don't know about that." So, don't you want to be on the New York Times bestseller list? Like, no, that's a bunch of tricks and crap, and I don't care about that stuff. I just, so, so it's nice. I'm in this place. What I'm doing is I'm paying, although a book is not a startup, obviously, but what I'm doing is paying a picture of answering your question. Like, so now I'm here. There are certain benefits I have. Like, I don't have to make money on the book. I do have all this experience in writing and startups to bring to bear, but I don't have as much energy as I used to have. Starting a brand new company now and then wrestling with AI sounds way too hard for me. Like, I'll let the next generation do that, right? So I know that. I know I don't want to do that. So you could say that's a weakness. Okay, sure. But I can find something where I can take my strengths and make something unique and maybe desirable for some people. We'll see, right? And that's what people should do, is take their strengths and do things where, of course, you're leveraging those strengths, and the weaknesses either don't matter, or the people that buy it don't care, or even sometimes they see it as a strength. So, for example, you could say that me writing in long form is a weakness because people don't read anymore. They just read. You're right. But it's a strength in that, for people who lament the fact that, of course, you're not going to get good advice reading little snippets on Twitter. Of course not. Someone who spends just an incredible amount of hours on every chapter, in fact, way more time than you'd think on each sentence. That thing, for some people, it's like, great, because that almost doesn't exist anymore, and I love it. So how many people is that? I don't know. A small number. I know that. But for them, the fact that I do that is a strength, not a weakness. So anyway, I know I'm going on, but it's because I think this is a key part of any strategy or anything that people do, is to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, the capabilities and assets that you have, and then ask, can I do a project or a startup where the startup strategy is that it will succeed if the things that you're strong in are used. It's designed for that, and your weaknesses, again, are either not weak, or maybe they're even strengths for your target market. That's the ideal strategy. So I'm living that. Okay, a book is low stakes, I admit that, but nevertheless, I'm living it. So there you go.
Nice. I love this. I love this answer, and I know we're almost running out of time. So the last question I have is: do you think that optionality is a blessing or a curse? Because the reality is, like, in your case, when, as you mentioned, all the studies, you start having like a lot of optionality when you've cashed out some of the money, or like you manage to not need to work anymore. So you have essentially like infinite optionality, but at the same time, having infinite optionality makes you in a state where you don't always know what to do. So what's your feeling about it?
You don't know what to do, and also you don't need to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing is like, if
Yeah,
I
it's a
just
good
stop
point.
working on the book and say screw it and just refund everyone's pre-orders, I can
Yeah.
just do that. That's bad for
Yeah.
motivation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the worst.
So it can be
Mm.
useful to self-impose limits and motivation, or limits and goals and deadlines and stuff to create that, even when of course it doesn't need to be there. So yeah, what to pick and how motivated to be. Yeah, of course it's an issue. So of course the answer is both. The answer is, of course it's better if you can pick what to do and you have time to wait for the right thing to be discovered by you, because you don't need to waste time on things you don't like. You don't need to do something just out of necessity. Of course that's better. How could that not be better? And also, it's, hard to pick and it's hard to be motivated, and that's not a good thing. So clearly it's both things. So I think ultimately, of course, it's better to have optionality, so you can use what time you have on Earth, which is of course your most valuable thing, and you don't even know how much you have of it. So of course, if you have optionality of how to use that fundamentally is better. You'd rather have too much time and resources and then say, gee, I need to put in extra structures so that I'm not idle or indolent. That's good. That's a good problem to solve. That's a better problem than, I just have to be at a job I don't like rather than doing what I want to do because I don't have options. It's clearly not better. So it's not like you don't have any. So yeah, there's something to do, but it's obviously that's a better position, a better thing to have to solve. Um, and it's funny, humans, uh, we we kind of like to impose rules that don't exist and then see what happens. And in fact, there's unfortunately I forget the person's name, but this is not me. Defines a game as a thing where we invented rules and restrictions to test ourselves, to see our own the results that we have under those artificial constraints. And the fact that they're artificial is what makes it a game. And the example he gives is, if you go rock climbing, it's a game. I mean, it's fun. It's a game. It's to challenge you. You could decide what rules to set about where you climb and how fast and whether the speed matters and what kind of everything. It's a game. You can decide whatever challenge you want. On the other hand, if someone's stuck at the top of a mountain and search and rescue have to get them, they also climb the mountain. It's not a game because it has to be done. The rules are physical, they're right. And like it's not a game anymore, even though it's the same activity. And the difference is because we artificially set the rules on purpose. That's what made it a game. So it has to be restrictive, and then it's a game. So in that sense, you could say, all right, what's nice is with optionality, you get to pick games in that definition. Whereas before, if you don't, you still might, sure, you probably have more options than you think, and that's useful to explore, right? But ultimately, you're not completely in control of what that is. You got to get some money. You got to, something like you're less in control. If those are not issues, it really is just strictly a game. You're going to impose your own rules. So obviously, again, that's better personally, but you could ask, okay, but I better set up some rules, otherwise I'm not doing anything. And the fact that it is a game and not real in the sense, that could be demotivating. So these are psychological challenges. And again, you read some of these, I don't know if it's a study, but it's a paper, and just, yeah, everyone goes through this. So it's just what it is. It's against reason is what it is. But anyway, and then people found all kinds of different things. They go into philanthropy. I have some ideas for that as well, actually. They start another company, they buy their old company back, right? Um, uh, Sometimes they do something in a completely different field. Sometimes they do it in the same field to leverage a different field because it's interesting and growing and learning something new, or it's the same field because they can leverage your expertise. Again, both of those seem very reasonable things to do, reasonable games to play. Um, uh, some never find something and are unhappy. Right? Like that's not the answer you want, but sometimes that's what happens, right? So, this is why I don't have an answer other than, yeah, that all happens. Um, but maybe it's useful to say you need to pick a couple of games so that you have purpose. And maybe purpose is another thing you could think about. So in other words, if you just need to work to live, you don't really have time to think about what is my purpose in life and what kind of legacy can I leave and all this kind of stuff. But if you don't, then you can have time for that. And perhaps that should be your goal, is to say, what do I want people to say at my funeral? What kind of impact can I have in the world? And by that, I don't mean how many noses can I push into my app. I mean, could I just help a few people? What about my family? What about other things around me? And so forth. That could be more fulfilling than money, especially now that you have enough money. And all of a sudden you really care about it. Like if you really care about a philanthropic cause, then you genuinely want to work hard to make that good. It's no longer an artificial game you've set up. Sure, the consequences if you fail or if you don't do as well aren't that you now are kicked out of your house. Okay. But if you really care about that cause, there are real consequences to real human beings that you care about. Well, okay, that's a fantastic purpose. In fact, caring about a bunch of other human beings is a better and maybe even more motivating purpose than accumulating some more money for yourself. So that can be, again, not everyone. I'm not saying that's for everybody. Some people find that, some people don't. Like, and I'm not judging either. I'm just saying, like, these are the kinds of things you could think about and explore. Like, could I have a purpose that's bigger than myself? Because now I can afford to in both the sense of money and time. I couldn't even think about that before. So how do I even know what I think about that? Right. Good. That's a exploration. In the meantime, yeah, it's you're sort of wandering and it's on the one hand, it's, it's not, doesn't feel good to be wandering. On the other hand, how can you complain? So
thanks a lot. I think it's the perfect final answer to wrap up the episode. And thanks really for all the wisdom and sharing so openly, because I feel a lot of CEOs so successful as yourself don't always share so openly. So I'll definitely go check the book and pre-order it. Where can people follow you for all the updates?
Yeah, so my main website is asmartbear, like the animal.com, because I made it during Smart Bear. And so that's all those articles I mentioned, and it's, my social stuff, and I'm asmartbear on Twitter and blah, blah, blah. And then again,
We'll
the
put all
book
the links.
is hiddenmultipliers.com. And no, I'm not tracking any stats. I won't know how many come from the podcast. Like, it's okay. I'd love people to get it, but I'm not even tracking it. So don't worry. There's no ROI going on here.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jason. Talk soon.
Thanks for having me.